Testing, test. Okay.
green, it's on.
Okay.
These mics are real sensitive. I don't even know that you need a mic.
Okay.
Turn on your mics. Okay, Mrs.
Appreciate you showing up.
Absolutely.
And if you can help us.
You guys on?
We're on.
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 You ready? Okay, we're going to go ahead and call our special meeting of the Wayne County Board of Education to order. It is 5:01, and if you'll stand, we'll say the pledge. Randy, will you care to lead us this evening?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Good evening. All right, let the record show that all board members are present in person this evening. And we will begin with our legislative forum. The board plans to discuss with our local representatives matters that are impacting our school system here in Wayne County. And this evening we have Mr. Corby Dillon and Mr. Mark Maynard with us. Yes, sir.
Also, we have Senator Hart trying to join, but he's not sure where to call in.
Oh,
He's
okay.
trying to call in my phone.
All right, we can make that happen.
I can give you a number for him to call. Can you text it to him?
Sure.
Geez, I don't want my cell phone.
Okay. That should get us going.
While we wait here, the board would like to thank both Mr. Maynard and Mr. Dillon and Mr. Hart when we get him for joining us this evening. It's always
Yeah,
really nice.
we appreciate you being here. Senator Fuller had scheduled to come, but I think he's got caught out of town and texted me this afternoon, said he couldn't make it. And Senator Wolfle was planning to be here, so hopefully he makes it here a little bit.
Good deal. Our pleasure.
Not yet.
Well, he is probably, calling from Mingo County, and sometimes the service.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
right.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and let Mr. Alexander get us started here with our agenda.
Yeah, so in the email that we sent inviting you, we listed some things that would be topics of discussion tonight. So there's a couple key items. that we'll be focused on and talk about several things underneath each key item. Number one is just funding stability, budgets. And, I know you guys follow the statewide news, and I know you get information up at the legislature about the loss of enrollment that's occurring across the state that was projected because birth rates are down. And so we're projected to lose enrollment along probably with about 51 other counties in the state for the next decade. And so that enrollment loss is causing budget issues. So there were some things that we thought would be helpful from the state level for the budget issues. So on your agenda that you have in front of you, item 2A, the first thing that we would speak about is what's called an essential personnel bridge grant. Now, what this is for is to fund special ed positions that are really not covered under the formula. So the way the funding formula is, and I know we talked quite a bit about it last year, but the way the funding formula works, we are allocated a certain number of service personnel per number of students. So that number, I think, is around 18 or so. So for every 18 students, we receive one service personnel position. What we get into at the same time that we've seen declining enrollment overall, we've seen an increase in the special education population. So the percentage of kids that need special needs services is higher than it's ever been. Here comes that call in. Senator Hart or Delegate Hart?
How are you?
Doing good. I just answered the phone, so I've got you on speaker, and Senator Maynard and Corby Dillon are with us, and then our 5 Board of Education members. And we were just starting the discussion about trying to stabilize funding for school districts. And the first item that we were talking about was what we refer to as an essential personnel bridge grant, which has to do with special education population. And I was just saying that our percentage of special needs students has increased. We're dealing with the highest percentage of special needs students that we've dealt with in the last decade at the current time. And with that higher percentage, there comes very specific needs, sometimes more severe needs. And when that occurs, we have to hire sometimes one-on-one aides with these students, and it just doesn't fit within the formula. So that drives up our numbers that we are over formula for the district. And so we have, for several years, we have thought it would be a good idea if the state held some special ed funding and at the State Department, and that counties could apply for that when there was a significant need, a high need with a student that required staffing outside of the existing ratios that are currently established for special ed personnel. So that was one idea we had for funding stability. The second item, 2B, is, and this is just a thought for trying to stabilize the decreasing funds that the public schools are seeing, what's called an enrollment stabilizer formula change. So our funding from the state is based upon our October 1st enrollment each year. So each October 1st, we have to start planning the budget for the next school year, and we have to plan for the reduction of funds. I gave you a graph. You have one of the pieces of paper in front of you is a graph. The blue line is the enrollment for the district. And so when we're talking about decreasing enrollment for the next decade, you can see where things have been for the past several years. I can tell you that back in 2016, the total enrollment over the district was over 7,000. And again, it was projected that it was going to drop. and it has followed that pattern. So I believe it's the red line. The red line that you see there is the excess personnel that the county has to pay for out of local budget. So the more positions that we have over the formula, the higher that number goes. Now, if you'll notice in 25 and 26, that number dropped to 8.5 million. And then this year it was projected to be about 7.5 million. That's because of job cuts. That's because of positions being eliminated. That number is able to be reduced. What we get into, what you see there for 2027, that projection of it shooting back up to 9.2 million, we've lost about 215 students this year alone. And it's about $1.4 million less money that we'll have coming in from the state for next year's budget. So we had cut during the last personnel season, we had cut approximately 27 positions. We're right back to where we started because of the enrollment loss. We have to cut 30 positions just to get back to where we sit today, budget wise, because we're going to have less money coming in with the new year. And so when you see that number goes up from 21 to 24, it wasn't because we were adding positions. It was because we were losing students and we were receiving less funding from the state to pay those positions. So the cost for the district went up during that period of time. If you go back and look at the district's positions between 2017 and 2026, we are down quite a few positions, but the amount that the district has to pay has went up significantly because of that loss in enrollment. So item B, that enrollment stabilizer formula change, what it would propose is instead of taking these big hits like the 220 and the 1.4 million being lost for next year, that there'll be a 3-year rolling average of district enrollment, so that you don't take a significant hit in one specific year. Or it mentions here having a 98% prior year minimum as a funding floor, so that there's a loss that's calculated for every single year, but that it's capped at that you're not going to lose more than 2% from what you lost the previous year. So those are some ideas to help with the budget picture. Any questions about either of those items? Any comments, questions, anything you want to know?
Uh,
Not a few, but
Okay. You can go.
real quick, this is a defined service personnel. I know it sounds like a simple question, but I want to know who that encompasses.
So that's your cooks, that's your custodians, that's your bus drivers, that's your maintenance workers, those positions.
AIDS,
Aides,
ECATs.
aides and ECATs.
Secretary.
And so that's how the special education, you need extra aides, I guess. Is that
Correct.
you don't need increased,
Nurses.
you don't need increased teachers?
This help that's needed is more one-on-one. Sometimes it is teachers.
Okay.
So, any personnel funding on any of the sides would help.
So currently the school aid formula doesn't give you any extra funding depending on the quantity of special education students you have in the county, right?
No, we have a special education budget where we receive funds to operate the special ed program, but a large majority of the positions that are classified as special ed positions are paid for by the county directly. They count in our numbers that were allowed based upon our October 1st enrollment.
And that money coming from the state isn't related to the number of special education students you have.
It is related to that
Oh, is it?
number, but again, it's not personnel money. Some of that, a little bit of that money is used for personnel,
Yeah.
but overall, it's used for services for the kids.
One last question. You mentioned local budget right now 8.5, I guess, out of your local budget. What's the total local budget?
The total local budget is, Jeb, what number would you give for the total general fund for the year? What budget are we looking at?
For 26, about 79 million.
Okay, and is that entirely, does that come from the personal property tax, or what makes up that 79 million?
So the 79 million, that is the money that we receive from the state.
Oh.
State aid.
Yeah, it's state aid. And then the local taxes that are collected are subtracted from the state aid. And then the state funds the rest. So in other words, they apply the school funding formula.
Got it.
They come up with a total dollar figure. They subtract anything that we collect locally. What's left, they provide.
So 79 million is your budget?
Yeah.
And then how much is subtracted from that, from the county, what the county chips in? Do you know the county amount?
Roughly about 9 million, nine, give or take,
Okay.
9 million
All right.
in the current levy. And then we also have about 11 million in excess levy.
And how much for the regular levy?
Right around 9 million.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because that includes property tax. Okay, yeah. All right. That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Alexander, you mentioned birth rate as one of the contributing factors here for the declining enrollment. So a question I have, culture and schools, they kind of have this entangled relationship. One affects the other, which affects the other, and it kind of self-perpetuates sometimes. So the question I have is, how many of our students, for example, are young women, men, during high school, for example, have access to classes such as home ec or anything like that, which would maybe encourage them to want to start families and have babies?
I think the focus has been on, pregnancy after marriage. Is there any specific classes that encourage that? I don't think that there is.
We do have CTE programs for Pro Start and things like that encourage entrepreneurship and, cooking, baking, catering, that kind of thing. But as far as like your typical home ec that you and I had, it's not really offered anymore, and it's not really a program that's offered anymore at the higher education level so that we could offer it in the schools.
So I guess the question I'm getting to here, and obviously I'm talking about students when they graduate high school and they start families, not having babies during high school.
Right.
Didn't want to confuse you there, but what image or what impression of motherhood are our students getting as they come through the school system? Are they looking at that as something for maybe one day to put on the back burner and then come back to after they've gone, through years of college and all of that? Or are they looking at that as a viable way of life to stay here in Wayne County and raise a family with a husband? I mean, if we don't have any way that we're reinforcing that, then how can we be surprised when birth rates drop across the board?
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess my answer to that, we're teaching math, English, social studies, science. Those aren't topics that come up. Those aren't topics that come up in the schools as far as encouraging family planning or anything like that. We leave that to the homes.
nothing. Okay. So nothing in social studies about families or the benefits of families. That's interesting. Okay. All right. I just thought I'd ask about that.
Senator Hart, any questions?
Well, yeah, I assume that the literature and the question of long-term fulfillment and perpetuating, just fulfillment and where that comes from. I think that we may have a public school system that focuses a whole lot on college and career readiness, along with the other main topics of the old Common Core. And we may be very light in traditional Western education and what we're supposed to get from that. And I deeply appreciate the CTE classes and ProStart, but I think there was a time that we focused on family and community, and I have great concerns that we're focused on money and an education racket and not on our communities. So I guess I don't have a question unless that leads you to something perhaps I'm gone astray on there.
No. The item 2C, so another budget help, deals with transportation. So item C is rural transportation support, and this would be addressed for large geographic counties, which Wayne County would classify as a large geographic county. We're talking about the numbers of service personnel that the district is allowed to have. We run, just short of 90 bus runs to cover the distance that's necessary to cover in the district for kids to get to school. Well, with that many bus runs, and we really can't, it's very difficult to trim those down. We have trimmed down several over the past few years, but it's really difficult to get past that number. And there are counties that are twice our size that have less bus runs than we do. And so they have a lot more service personnel that are funded through the state to operate those runs. And so the positions that they don't have to fund for bus runs, then they can use for these special needs, that type of thing. So one of the things that we thought would be interesting to think about is trying to do something for rural transportation support for large geographic counties. So the idea of having a multiplier that would increase the transportation reimbursement by 10 to 20% for districts that are classified as large geographic counties to help cover some of that cost of fuel and the number of buses that we are having to keep on the road from year to year. Just an idea.
So, just to respond to that, this is Delegate Dillon. Thomas Jefferson was a big supporter of rural schools. And I find myself aligning much with his vision. He wanted to have one school for every 100 families. And I think that's a noble goal. And so when I go, to Charleston and represent, I try to impress upon my colleagues the importance of not just certain counties having the resources they need because, our topography is so diverse throughout the state, but making sure that every family has what they need within their community where they live so that they are not going to have to rearrange their lives just to take advantage of, that very basic opportunity that education affords. So to that, I will say this, the headwinds that I faced last year going in after our meeting here in trying to advocate for additional measures and adjustments for the rural counties and for the logistics that and the challenges we face, they were significant headwinds. I would say that in the House, I'm not going to speak to the Senate, but I would say that in the House, there was a significantly robust level of support among the rank and file of the delegates. But I would also say at the same time that the leadership in the House and the leadership and the chair of education specifically, they do not seem to share the same concern that we do. And we could speculate on reasons for that. But last year, the push was not so much for supporting our rural counties, it was more a push toward consolidating districts, into these super districts. And I think there's a huge disconnect here between, what the people want and what the local communities need, and some of our leadership in the House. And, quite frankly, at this time, I don't know how to bridge that gap as I sit here. I know I want to continue to try for my part, to do so and to work with others who are like-minded.
Not just because I'm a board member, but because I know how it was and it is for me as far as reaching out to my representatives. If you have huge districts, unlike it is here, where you probably know at least one board member by name and you can reach out to them and talk to them and stuff, that's going to take away any kind of influence that the common person has with their leadership or the board, And I take it you agree with me on that.
Well, I think if we look at the recent history of the State Board of Education and state superintendent, and this is me speaking, so it doesn't reflect on anyone else here, but I think it's fair to say that their emphasis has not been toward making sure that the local citizens have that voice with their boards of education, both at the local level and the state level. I think that's evidenced by the takeover, frankly, in Mingo County and other counties. And so those are the circumstances under which I'm operating currently as an employee of the Mingo County Board of Education. And, it's unfortunate that in both my professional capacity and in my legislative capacity, I'm having to deal with that sort of environment.
Right. It's just hard. It's hard to protect our local community schools, our smaller, more rural schools, if something doesn't give with this formula. I mean, we've been holding on pretty tightly for the past 6 years at least. And our grip is, slowly lessening. So we're trying, but it's, when you're faced with, a deficit in your budget or having to look at closure of schools, that's a pretty tough situation, especially when you've got 18 schools to look after. So
I just add, I would think if they start consolidating more county districts, it's going to get worse
right,
on the smaller, more rural counties.
they'll be the first to go.
Well, item C was rural transportation support. Item D ties right in with it. And
Before we move on to
Sure.
D, there's currently a rural distance multiplier and you're wanting that to be increased, right?
correct.
Right.
I didn't catch that.
There's currently a rural distance multiplier, and he's asked if we were wanting that to be increased. So there's through the funding formula, they identify districts as sparsely populated, et cetera. So there is a multiplier for the state aid, but we would look for an additional increase for the transportation.
How far are some of these students being bused in? How many hours a day or a week do they spend on a bus?
Well, I mean, you're looking, there's some that are on the bus anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour.
The older they are.
And that's morning and afternoon. And
If we lose these community schools, I'm assuming that distance would increase.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it would increase some. And I can tell you, even in smaller geographical counties, you still have bus rides that are that long. So, you've got kids with 10-hour school days.
Has any data been collected on how that may affect student behavior and outcomes?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Now, I know that Marshall University conducted a study a few years ago on school size and travel distance and socioeconomic status, and found that the students who were in the lower echelons of socioeconomic status were disproportionately impacted in a negative way when they went, to a larger school or had to be bused further. So there is precedent for that, and there have been studies outside of West Virginia also to that effect, which corroborate those findings.
When that leads to item D, which is a rural school protection clause. And the purpose would be to prevent unavoidable closure of isolated rural schools due to enrollment-based funding. And what we would suggest as one possible idea is that counties would be allowed to designate one rural anchor school that would be funded at a guaranteed minimum of 150 students to help the district support keeping the school open. So, some of the smaller districts, the state has a guaranteed enrollment number for districts. If districts fall below a certain number, and I off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's 1,500.
Something like that.
If they fall below that number, they are still funded at that 1,500 student level. So our proposal would be that every district be allowed to identify a community school, or what we would call rural anchor school, and that it would have that same protection as the smaller districts have, where there was a guaranteed minimum funding.
This is something that really needs to be looked at, and I talked to you, Senator Maynard. I fought very hard a couple of years ago to keep two of our smaller schools open, and I still want to do that. But when you lose, how many students have we lost? 200?
It's 220 this year,
220?
215 this year.
And $1.5 million. I don't know how much longer I can hold out on that or help. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure there's a lot of other counties in the same predicament, like the county you're teaching in probably has the same
Yeah.
situation, doesn't it?
We're facing very similar conditions.
So we need help, and I'm hoping you or some of you can get to some of the leadership up there.
The number of closures that have occurred, over the last 2 years are historical.
And I've reached out to the state superintendent and asked for her specific recommendations on how to address this. And I've essentially been told, well, it's going to cost a lot of money. That was the end of it. I got no specific recommendations, in other words.
It comes out of priorities.
Huh?
Comes out of priorities.
So anyway, I'm not going to belabor that, but I do have a question on this. So that the guaranteed minimum of 150 students. Now, let's say you don't need 150. Let's say you have 75 for a given year. The excess funding at that point would revert to the state, or if I understand the way this is written, you're asking for a set aside or a reserve to be able to fund and guarantee such a school. But then what happens if that number of enrollment isn't met, and yet you have the funding for that number?
Yeah. So with the funding number, we currently have at least 4 schools that are under 150. So what we would propose is to protect against multiple closures across the district, that at least one of those schools, that we be able to declare that school a rural anchor school. And it's always funded at 150, regardless of how many students that they have.
So what if they go above 150?
Then it drops. The rural anchor designation would drop,
Okay.
and then they would be funded at whatever their enrollment was.
But if they're at 75, they're still going to be funded at
At
150. So what do you do with the funding that was going to go to the other 75?
But still that building and that structure doesn't shrink, even if there's just 75 kids versus
Right.
150. So the funding for that facility isn't going to change. You know what I mean?
I do see what you're saying, the
Right.
fixed costs. Now, particularly if those have already been absorbed and the facilities paid off for construction purposes, and you're basically just dealing with maintenance, that's a different calculation at that point. But I kind of like to see that fleshed out a little bit more as to exactly how that would work financially.
Yeah, we can provide you some more information on that. The real cost, and you were talking about the district's overall budget, the general fund. 85% of our cost is personnel related. And that's where the real cost of operating the small schools comes is from personnel. Because you have classes, we're funded on a ratio. We're allowed a certain number of professional positions per number of students. Let's say it's 15 students per professional position. Well, if you've got multiple classrooms that are under that 15 size limit, that eats up your formula. So what happens is when you have multiple schools that are spread out and are not at maximum class size, it costs you more. And so it's the personnel cost more than anything. But the building cost is also a concern, especially when you have older buildings and you're trying to keep it up. But we can provide you some specifics on that. That's no problem.
But do you think that it might, in my mind, it's going to be hard to have 150 students if you've got these smaller rural schools with less than 100 or around 50 or something to combine to meet the 150.
It wouldn't be an actual number of 150.
Right, it's just,
You just
we're
don't
still
funded
gonna
at
need,
get funded for that.
if it's
Funded
an
for that,
elementary.
No matter how many.
Yeah.
Right.
We're still gonna need
Right.
5 teachers if it's an elementary at the minimum.
Right.
Yeah.
Once we do split grades. like
Whether
we've
you
had-
have
Yeah,
10
right.
kids
Which
in the
would-
class or
Right.
5
Yeah,
kids in the
but I was
class.
thinking you had to have 150, and I'm thinking, how are you going to do that?
You have,
just like
you
a-
have a secretary in the building, you have a custodian in the building.
Cooks.
Have a
Eggs,
cook in the
cooks,
building. Right.
So
bus drivers.
if I'm picking up what you're laying down here a little bit is you're trying to find a way to guarantee that every citizen and their children, no matter whether they live in town or way out in the sticks, like a lot of us, that they're not going to be discriminated against in terms of their educational experience just because of where they happen to live.
Exactly. Equal.
And whether we do it exactly this way or a little
Another.
different way, it's just you're looking for that
Yeah.
guarantee.
Exactly.
Okay.
Todd, what 4 schools are currently under 150?
Eastland, Pritchard, Genoa, and Dunlow.
I got excited on your first bullet point on 2D, and then I wasn't so excited on the second bullet point because there's only 1 in there. I was hoping like there'd be some kind of guarantee for all the schools, but I
It
know
would be
that
nice.
would be
Love it.
financially,
We
no, it'd be
would love it.
financially not
Based
the answer.
on size, that would be nice.
Yeah.
But we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot and ask for too much, but
Yeah.
the bigger the county, if more anchor schools could be approved, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, if they were all set at 150, that would be fantastic.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it's the appropriate time to ask this question, but kind of we're talking about funding and probably what everything's about. This is going to be kind of a lengthy answer probably, but so with the Hope Scholarship funding, let's just give some generic figure. What's the total cost per student in Wayne County what's your total cost?
It's about 7,000. We receive in state aid funding per student this
I'm
year.
sorry, total money spent per student, because I know the state average is 15, and some counties are a lot more, 15,000, and some are a lot less. You know the total number.
No, I don't know the
Let's
total number.
say it's 15,000, and Hope Scholarship is around 5,000, but it's increasing, every year. But let's just for practical purposes say it's 5,000. So our federal money that we receive is based on school age population. Okay. So we get this federal money no matter how many students are in our schools, at least through the state money that the state distributes. Charter school kids, I think on average, somehow get 10,000, for their enrollment. My question is, though, for the purposes of county, where does that extra $10,000 go? My thoughts were that the counties would be, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, but just me thinking that the counties would be flush with money because they're getting an extra 10,000 per student that they don't have to educate with this Hope Scholarship thing. So explain that to me.
Yeah, so again, on October 1st, the state takes a snapshot of how many kids we have enrolled.
Okay.
And then they give us, I think this year it was, Jeb, it was 7,000, wasn't it?
Pretty close.
Yeah, it was
Total?
Total.
7,000 per student is the base. Now, they've got some that funding formula. I've never actually seen the funding formula. But the funding formula itself, they have, there's a certain allotment for transportation and things like that. So I don't know how they calculate all those amounts, but the bottom line is they look at our funding based upon the number of students multiplied by 7,000. So if we're down 215 students, you can multiply that by $7,000, and that's how much we're going to lose. And then we're going to lose a little bit more because of other factors in the funding formula.
So do you think the state keeps extra money? Let's say it's 7,000. I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but and 5,000 gets jerked out of that 7,000. That leaves 2,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
For not educating a student. And I'm not. This isn't a gotcha question. I've asked this for years, so I guess depending on when that student leaves for the Hope Scholarship as to whether you get the extra 2,000 or whatever. But wouldn't the state receive that extra?
I don't know how their system works, how their funding per student comes in. I would be surprised if the federal government's funding them per student.
No, the federal government funds them per school age children in the state, according to the
Period.
census. Has nothing to do with enrollment.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works there.
Okay. So anyway,
We don't see any of that money that goes to charter schools, do we?
No,
We just have
they actually here a couple of years ago when the Hope Scholarship was approved and charter schools were approved, they actually do a subtraction out of our formula in the calculations that they send to us, that they show us, that they've taken the number of students, they've multiplied it by 7,000, we get this amount of money, and then they subtract, there's a charter school subtraction that comes out of that to get to our final number.
And we probably even have some more expenses that I don't know whether Todd know what it is, but the county is expected to take care of attendance, right? And expulsions and stuff like that for the charter schools. And we don't have a say. They have their own board and they run their own thing. But then when there's a problem, then we have to take care of it. Is that right?
Well, yeah, if they're dismissed from charter
Monitor.
school, we have to.
Seems
we
to
have
me
to
like
come back
that's a
in.
little bit extra expense too.
There's no charter schools though in Wayne County, right?
No,
No.
I have a question for either one of you.
there's,
You probably
I think
can't-
there's a micro school, but I'm not aware of any charters. Go ahead, Mark.
I have a question for either one of you, and maybe you can't supply the answer because I couldn't get it. But I would love to see if one of you all or somebody up there could get a cost of the administrative costs for the State Board of Education. That's money that should be coming in to the students. And I feel like it's an extra layer of, this is my personal opinion, okay? I'm not speaking for anybody but Mark. I feel like it's a layer that's taking money away from our schools because I was there. I know Building 6 is huge. There's people everywhere. Not bashing the State Department of Education, but I'm speaking to you and you all know what I'm saying because you're there also. That's an awfully large group. And I would like to know what part of that money that you're talking about, Senator Maynard,
Good question.
is paid for the administrative costs instead of coming down to the students that it should be coming down to.
At one time, I heard there was 400 employees in
At
that building,
least, at
and they
least.
didn't teach, administrate, drive a nail on the board, or take the trash out. So
When, before the Department of Education was created, the state superintendent just had a basic bare bones staff, and we weren't asking them to manage all these different departments, or programs for education throughout the state and all that. And really, as education has kind of just ballooned out, and we've created all sorts of these various programs and so forth, the bureaucracy has bloated up equally. And I think that would be a great place to start. So I appreciate that. I've had similar concerns myself. So I think we can find that out.
Don't get a lot of straight answers on that question.
Okay, moving on to item 3, accountability and transparency. Our conversation kind of led to some of the talks about the charter schools and there's private schools, micro schools, et cetera. We think it would be important that the majority think that it would be important that all publicly funded schools have an accreditation pathway, and that if they're receiving state funds, that there should be some kind of check to see what type of education is being provided through those systems. And that would include item B that you see under that number 3, talks about statewide testing and comparable data, that all students in publicly funded schools that are receiving taxpayer dollars should participate in statewide assessments or approved equivalents. And data should be reported so that parents know what they're signing up for when they sign up for the schools. And so I provided you a handout, and it's the sheet that's got 3 columns. This sheet, this is proficiency data from last school year for districts. And you'll notice that there's 60 schools listed because the public schools, the public charters do have to report out. So they are on this list. But there's a number of schools that receive that Hope Scholarship money that do not have to report out and are not on this list. And so you'll see in red, you'll see where some of these charter schools are reporting their numbers. Wayne County is in yellow. The statewide average is also reported. And you'll see where the rankings for the public charters fall. And if I was a parent and I was sending my students to one of these academies, I would certainly want to know where they fall within these proficiency rankings.
Is this percentage number like based on normal
Total?
testing? Like when I got a 69%, it was failing?
No. It's the percentage of students that are proficient in that particular subject area.
Okay.
So there's testing that goes for grades 3 through 8. And then at grade 11, all students in public schools and the public charters are taking the SAT. And so it's the students that are at meet standards or above, that's the percentages that you see.
So technically, I mean, everybody's failing, right? I mean, according to
Yes.
like bad failing.
Yeah, and you'll see those numbers. You'll see some of those numbers nationwide, but yeah, West Virginia ranks lower. Corby, what, about 48 maybe out of the
Yeah. More reason to pull some money back from the Department of Education.
For our guests here and anybody's listening in, the highest ranking county in math is 56.1%. Highest in English is 62.4%. And highest in science is
52.6.
52.6, yeah. And everybody else is below that. All the way down to 16.2% and this is on a school, like including charter schools and county.
Yeah.
On math is 16.2 is the lowest. In English is 28.8 and science is 10.9. And that's I guess a charter school.
Correct.
Hmm.
It's the same charter school at the bottom of the list across the board.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So anyway, we just think that we feel that if everybody should report their data out so parents know what they're getting.
So when we talk about universal accreditation and universal assessments, and you mentioned the Hope Scholarship, and this all kind of, it's all one big puzzle.
Mhm.
We talk about, declining enrollment and everything. If we're going to have or discuss a universal accreditation pathway, then essentially, and if we're going to assess based on that, and have universal standards, essentially is what I'm hearing, that would cover public and private, and pretty much every private school and Christian school in the state. So then my question to each one of you, and you can answer or remain silent, but my question would be, I'll start over here with Mark, is Genesis and Exodus history? History. Okay. Should that be included on this assessment as such? It should that be included in the state standards?
I think so.
Okay.
I do too.
Personally, I think that is something that should be taught at home and not on a standardized test.
So the question of whether it's history or not, either it is history or it's not history, because it's making factual claims. So we have to wrangle with that type of issue if we're going to go out and say that we're going to accreditate every school in the state. Okay, just your turn.
Yeah, the Bible can currently be taught in schools. It has to be taught as literature and not inspired literature. And the reason for that is because teachers come from a variety of backgrounds and a variety of different religious beliefs. And so I would agree with Ms. Hall that that's best left at home for religious instruction.
Okay, so if we're going to, again, take over and offer accreditation or require accreditation and require statewide assessments, which are going to align with standards, and we currently have standards which say that we must teach evolution, we must teach that man that began as a single cell and has been evolving upward ever since. These are the questions.
I don't think it's taught as fact. I think it's taught as a theory.
I think I think I can provide you with evidence to the contrary quite a bit, actually. But I won't belabor the point. We'll move on, Mr. Ashworth.
Well, I'm a retired minister, so I believe in the Bible and I believe in the history and Genesis and stuff. I believe it should be taught. But we have to deal with how the law or how the courts line up too. If it's up to me, yeah.
Well, I mean, you are a member of the Board of Education.
If it was put up for us to do it, I'd vote for it. Yeah.
So we're living in times where many Supreme Court decisions have gone in a new direction in recent years. So we have perhaps a golden opportunity to address issues such as this. And the fact is that the book of Genesis, it outlines certain origins of mankind and of the universe and of this earth as fact. And at the same time, we have embedded throughout our curriculum an evolutionary, atheistic, Marxist worldview. It's all throughout it. The assumptions are baked in. And we have Christian teachers who are going out there trying to wrangle with this and trying to cover the bases legally while at the same time not violating their convictions. So the question that we come back to is Genesis and Exodus, are they history or are they not? Are they fact or are they fiction? If we say we believe they're fact, then we better be following that through with some action.
Amen.
Now, we're going to move on down here, Mr. Troutwine. Fact or fiction?
I'll give you a very long and very personal answer. I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior on August 25, 1962. I was baptized in the waters of 12 Pole Creek, about a 10-minute drive from here. I believe that Jesus is, not was, is the Son of God, part of the triune God. I believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God from the book of Genesis through the book of Revelation.
Amen.
I fully believe in that. I am aware that we live in a multicultural society. I am certainly aware of the court decisions in the last 200 plus years in this country. I have friends who are not Christian, and I could give you a litany of all the other religious beliefs. If they're not a Christian, I do not agree with those beliefs. And for that matter, there are professed Christians with whom I do disagree certain areas and how they interpret the scriptures. So I absolutely agree in the Bible. Now, from a legal standpoint, well, and some people don't even like the terms denominations, but there's certainly differing, oh my goodness, Catholicism versus Protestantism, and certainly among the Protestants, they are divided in a lot of different ways. I would not, I don't have any children of school age anymore. I would not have wanted my sons to have in a public school been taught that they have to follow Catholicism or something like, let alone the various non-Christian beliefs. So to me, there's a little bit of a tension in what I adamantly believe and what we can do as a school system. Genesis, Revelation, I believe in every bit of it. What can we do as a school system under our present system of government? That is where the tension is for me.
Can we teach the West Virginia Constitution? Because when you read it, it very explicitly contains a statement of faith. It's very specific, and it states that every facet under that preamble in our Constitution, every provision, including those affecting and having to do with education, are there to reaffirm our faith in and constant reliance upon God. It's right there in black and white. Furthermore, the Declaration of Independence in our charter documents lays out very clearly that we are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights. So then we get into this question of, if we are not considering ourselves and teaching our children that we are created beings, that we're from a divine origin, then therefore we do not have divine origin of rights either. So how do we go and teach them about the American Revolution and who they are as citizens in America if they don't have rights which came from God?
Well, we teach them, and we absolutely teach them through the Declaration. I know recently we had, Frank, we're having this discussion, a United States Senator from Virginia a month or two ago proclaimed it was outrageous that somebody indicated our rights came from God and not from the state. Now, I found that an astounding pronouncement, not only because, our founding documents, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that among their rights, but they're endowed by their creator. I know President Kennedy in his inaugural address, he talked about, the oath that he had taken and that the rights did not come from the state, they came from God. And I absolutely believe in that. Now, the one thing I would not support, well, I'm not an advocate of just running into a wall if I know there's no other choice, but I frankly would not advocate having all of my religious beliefs in the school system. Well, I'm going to teach all the kids that, hey, they're to be baptized by immersion, not sprinkled. You get into a ton of legal issues there, eternal security or not, predestination, all of that. I wouldn't want to get into that in the school system.
I don't think that anyone's arguing that we need to go down every doctrinal rabbit trail. I think the question is whether or not the curriculum, which is being taught officially in the schools, precludes and is hostile toward a Christian worldview. And I would argue that as it currently stands, it is. It's hard to explain to someone 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, that that death has just always been part of the construct of the universe, and then teach them on Sunday morning that actually no, death came by sin through Adam. These are completely contradictory concepts. And so I'm bringing it back. I say all this for a reason. Okay. We had a discussion about enrollment, and we had a discussion about the community and why people are making the choices they're making. Why are people taking up this offer to, take the Hope Scholarship or to go to a charter school or whatever? And I think that if the school districts and the state board and the state superintendent and the entire structure of the West Virginia education establishment doesn't begin to recognize that parents perceive rightly, I would argue, that there's a divergence between the values that they hold dear to themselves and within the communities and the values which are being promoted within the schools at large. I'm not saying every school is, as bad as another one, but at large, in general, in the aggregate, our children are being trained in an atheistic, materialistic, Marxist manner far more, and being influenced in that direction far more than they are being influenced toward a Christian worldview for the 8 to 10 hours they spend each day in government supervision. So I think if our school system is willing to acknowledge that significant changes need to be made and maybe take up that mantle and begin to reconciliate with the communities and with the people of West Virginia, you might find that not only the legislature who represents these people starts to gather more support for the cause of public education. I think you would find that support would begin to materialize from a number of directions that probably you're not getting it from right now. That's something you need to think about.
I would like to chime in on that, just a slight amount.
Go right ahead.
Not sure which all states have taken the lead on this, but Oklahoma comes to mind. Their state superintendent has sent out Bibles to every school, wanted them in every classroom, and they wanted the Bibles to be taught to the classroom. But they have taken the initiative that even all the way down, I think, second grade, that students are to learn that Jesus Christ and the values, the biblical values, drove the pilgrims and the colonialists and everyone in the early days of the country and on through. I have spoken to many people across the state, and I'm quite aware we have a lot of very good board members, good administrators, and good teachers. But there is a concern that the schools themselves and the curriculum is godless at best and perhaps leans very hard on extreme socialistic Deweyism. And I have always been an educator. I'm a fan of public education. However, they make a good case. And I think we're going to continue to have a lot of folks leave the schools if we cannot turn the ship. We would be within most cases, I do believe, to insert early history such as Genesis and Exodus and Christian values. You know, Article 12, I think Article 12, Section 12 puts the schools, if I'm not mistaken, in West Virginia over that of morality. And if we do not have Christian or at least Abrahamic-based morality, I don't really know what type of morality we may have. But if we send folks out on a scavenger hunt to find their own morality, we may not be too surprised to find some bad things when they come back with their own morality. No, I don't think we'd be the first ones to do what Dr. Dillon is suggesting. That's all I have.
I have something I want to bring up at this point, and it may not be the time, but it's going to be. First of all, I want to thank you all for getting that bill passed. But the signs in God we trust, we were able to get it through the House,
Yes,
and then
me
the
too.
Senate did it this year. And thank you.
Yes.
And I want to bring to the board's attention that I have churches that have volunteered to pay for smaller signs to make available for every classroom in Wayne County if a teacher chooses to put them in their classroom, to put them in the schools. I spoke with Mr. Alexander about it the other day, and I would like that if it needs to be put on the agenda or whatnot for the next board meeting, I would like to put that on the agenda so we could vote on it and make it a possibility for that those churches could provide those. No cost to us, no cost to the taxpayers whatsoever. The churches are willing to do that.
That's awesome.
And it just popped in my mind.
Also, Mark, I have connections with the original company that paid for the signs and the printing company that printed them at cost too. So let's use those instead of, if we can get funding for that, I'm sure we might be able to do that. Also, on the comments from Delegate Dillon, it's a tough discussion, but I'm glad he brought it up. And, and it's something that we need to talk about. We're talking about how to get more kids in our school, and I wouldn't doubt that, there's conferences where educators and board members go and you see what's going on in the nation and what topics are supposed to, that's currently trending. But this discussion may help our whole state if we think about what the parents of the county want. And I think that, really the schools should be an extension of what the parent approves of.
Absolutely.
And if we did more, faith-based studies, let the parents have a say-so in it. I would hate for the parents to not want it. But, you know, if they do, and I think we're blessed with, you know, an awesome county here with strong Christian values. And that may be an answer, you know, an answer to increasing enrollment. You know, probably I'd say a lot of parents pull their kids out because they're not happy with some, you know, influencing that they're getting or something. They want to, you know, make a difference and be more, you know, in charge of what their kids hearing. But, you know, if a class like this is something that would, you know, it may keep a few kids in school that the parents are pulling out right now. So it's,
Are you suggesting having a separate class
you know,
to teach that?
it would, I think a Bible class would, you know, now, of course,
That would be a
like
good
has been
idea.
discussed, you know, not getting into denominations and probably not into interpretation.
Right.
But I think it would make a statement, you know, and of course, there'd probably be some, you'd want to get approval of the parents somehow. And I don't know how that would
It's
happen.
like,
What's-
it's like
a lot of
Delegate
what's-
Dillon said, a factual, historical
Yeah.
document.
And that's just one example.
Either it is or it isn't. And there's a lot of evidence which is currently not even being discussed. Not even being just, you can't even bring it up. In fact, we had a bill that came up, it was either last year or the year before, you know, allowing teachers to discuss intelligent design or alternative theories, you know, to evolution. And that was never even, you know, it got shot down.
Mhm.
And it's just, it's a shame because it is in the standards, the common ancestry
Legislature or the
Yeah.
National
Mhm.
Congress?
legislature.
Is in our
Um,
intelligent design. We were trying to slip it through
Well,
under that name,
I mean,
but it doesn't
yeah.
anymore.
you know, so common ancestry is in, and that is evolution. That is in the state standards. It has to be taught. And then the curriculum publishers, they take that and they run with that 9 more steps. Okay. And they make assertions that they can't even begin to back up. And they create narratives like Lucy, which you'll find in the social studies books about, you know, this primate who lived however many million years ago, that they create this whole narrative around and try to humanize this figure which never even existed. They create their own mythology, and then they turn around and say, well, the Bible isn't real. It's just a man-made myth. Well, they're very clearly making up their own mythology and presenting it as science. I mean, I will, you know what, I'll just probably make a post about that and provide some of the specifics, but that's just one example. It's just, it runs throughout the curriculum in multiple facets. And I will close with this. As a parent, yes, it's important to teach your children how to read and how to do 2 + 2, which, you know, I believe that if my children were enrolled in public school, they would learn how to do those things just fine. I did. I made it through somehow. But much more important than that, in a state like ours, parents understand that their number one job is to steer their kids toward heaven. And I think when we take an objective look at why many parents are choosing not to have their children in public school, it's because they will be spending so much time under influences, both in the curriculum and not in the curriculum. I mean, you also have to look at the social considerations and who they're spending time around. And in a state like ours, we have to be understanding that parents don't want a school system that's going to undermine their fundamental faith and values. And I'm going to leave it right there.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think it'd be good for the legislature to maybe try to set up some kind of survey and see what kind of, you know, views that the parents in general have? Because not everybody's going to, not, you know, he's a preacher and I'm a preacher, but we don't disagree on everything.
Well,
But we agree on our salvation in Christ. So, and you got to remember, when you're in a public school, you're mixed in with everybody.
So-
You know, you please one group, another group rises up. So we're in this precarious position where we try to operate by trying to adhere to our own values and our own beliefs. But at the same time, provide an education for the children with the least disruption. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. So,
You know, if it was up to me, I agree, you know.
so last year, I had a resolution I put up. It was HJR 21, as I recall. Actually, it was just this past session. And let me see if I can pull it up here and read it. And if this would have passed through the legislature, it would have gone out to the people, and people would have gotten to vote on it, just like they did on the preamble of the West Virginia Constitution, the same one which stated that all the provisions of the Constitution exist to reaffirm our faith in and constant reliance upon God. The same process will be followed for HJR 21. Or is it H? Let's see, maybe it was just JR. Anyway, I'm trying to pull it up here real quick, but what it did was it put to the people the question of whether the Holy Bible should be recognized as a literal historical document and should be given a place of prominence and recognition in our public buildings and in our schools. It was that simple. It would go out to the public. And then from that point, it would be part of the Constitution. Issue would be settled. So if each one of you would like to, express your support for such a resolution, I'm sure it would be very helpful to the cause and would help, resolve this entire issue.
The final thing that was on the list tonight, we were talking about what started the dialogue that occurred there was the idea about statewide testing, and that if you're receiving state funds, that you should report out your results so parents know exactly what they're getting. The second item I would bring up, and that this is the final item, is that homeschool testing submissions used to occur annually. And that has been changed. I think it's grades 3, 5, 8, and 11. And we've seen some horrible cases in the state of West Virginia where kids were undergoing serious neglect and abuse. And we would ask you to consider, if you have a chance to support those homeschool testing submissions, the progress being reported on a yearly basis. We know that there's families out there that do a good job with homeschooling. I know there's a lot that do not. And the idea of them submitting yearly assessments again, so that there's a little bit more accountability with that system. I know for some folks that's not necessary, and it's an inconvenience for them, but I think it would help avoid some of the situations that we've seen play out in the news over the last year or two.
You want to touch that?
Well, actually, no, since you're a homeschooler. won't
I
you-
will touch it.
Yeah.
I will touch it. Absolutely not. You're asking the same people who opted out of this system to come back and report to this system on whether they're doing a good job or not. There's a reason my 5 children are homeschooled, and you need to stay out of our business.
Do you-
I think that big issues we had, I can only think of one, maybe two, that was in the system. State patrol, state police had visited, was kicked over to CPS, and the government dropped the ball. So I'm not real sure if enrolling everyone back into the system that they're trying to escape is the right answer. And I'm not saying it's a bad system, but they certainly don't want to be in it. And I don't think that would have helped solve either of those issues that I could think of. There might be a third one that I don't know of.
Well, I know for decades that the requirement was that it occurred yearly. And, that changed here, within the last decade. And I would again say that an inconvenience for some that protects children overall, it's worth the inconvenience. So that's all I'd say about that. Board members, anything else? Any other questions?
No.
Comments?
I got a question.
Hold on. Our legislators, any other questions from you? Anything you want to speak to?
Got a little statement. First off, thank you for putting together that enrollment stabilization roundtable thing last week.
Yeah.
But one thing, maybe let the parents, they were there but maybe more of a way to hear why they're pulling their kids out of school, and maybe, some issue they have has a lot of popularity, then maybe look at trying to craft that and, from a county-wide way, or maybe a school, according to a certain school, if you got, parents that want something taught there or have a problem, just a little bit more
We
rapport.
are looking at exit interviews with our.
I brought that up,
parents.
Senator, at the last, or board meeting before last, I brought that up. And you were going to implement that in
This year.
this
Yeah.
year.
Right.
Yeah, then we're going to go back. We're going to go back and try to catch anybody that's
Yeah.
withdrawn
Already
this
gone.
year.
And one other thing that I thought of, probably closing community schools is not going to stabilize the enrollment. I don't know, but I would think if you close the school in a little community and you had a parent that was like on the border of sending their kids to school anyway, instead of putting them on a bus at 5:30 a.m., they'll probably opt out when you close their community school. I don't know, but just something to think about.
Right, I think that's the problem. I mean, we are faced with an issue of balancing our budget or saving our community schools, which we have worked hard to keep. I mean, you can look at our schools. I mean, we have two of the smallest schools in the state probably. And we've fought tooth and nail to keep them. But it's coming to a point where either we're going to be responsible for that deficit or we're going to have to do something that's super difficult. So-
Four out of the 18 are some of the smallest schools
Right.
in this state.
So it's not the fact that we don't want our community schools. That's
No.
what we've always based ourselves on. It's the fact that the budget only stretches so far and we have to be responsible and we have to keep a certain amount in reserve. And, there's just so many rules that we have to follow. So it's not that that's what we want to do because we know that's where that's going to lead.
Senator, I went to a one-room school for my first 4 or 5 years. And I fought to keep our 2 smallest schools open. But then we're precariously balanced on our